Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Thanks again for joining me here at the back of the range. I'm your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 58. Before we get to this week's guest, just wanted to thank everyone that I met at the PGA Merchandise Show in Orlando last week. I had to leave a little earlier than I would have liked, so next year I definitely will spend the majority of the week meeting and talking to all the great people in the golf world that make the pilgrimage each and every year to Orlando. So for those of you that I met, thanks very much for our conversations, and if I did not see you there, there's always next year. So if you're enjoying this podcast, I can't stress this enough. Let me know what you like, and also let me know what types of guests you'd like to see in the future. Whether you'd like to hear some golf course architects or perhaps some instructors, maybe you want to hear some more amateurs or some more players on the PGA or LPGA Tour. Please let me know. Feedback is absolutely key. Leave a review in Apple Podcast or shoot me an email. All of the information that you need is located at thebackoftherange.com. Our social media channels, all that information is listed there, and it's also listed in the show notes of this podcast. So if you've been following and listening to The Back of the Range for a while, you know that we've had some guests with some serious playing resumes. USGA champions, PGA Tour winners, World Golf Hall of Famers. We've had amazing people on this podcast. Our guest this week has an impressive playing resume, but I wish that this episode would have gone on for hours. He is just a tremendous storyteller and a true gentleman of the game. So he played his college golf at the University of Florida. His teammates included Andy Bean, Gary Koch, Andy North, and Fred Ridley. If you don't know those names, go ahead and look them up. Andy North won a couple of U.S. Opens. Fred Ridley's running the Masters. So you might want to dip in and see who those players are. So while he never did turn pro, he did have a solid amateur career that really started to blossom once he entered the senior ranks. He won the British Senior Amateur and the Canadian Senior Amateur in 2011 and 2012. So yes, that's a double back-to-back. He was a semifinalist at the U.S. Senior Amateur in 2010, 11, and 13. He's been the low amateur in the British Senior Open multiple times. He competed in the 2016 U.S. Senior Open, and that's because of the highlight of his senior career, the 2015 U.S. Senior Amateur Championship. By now, you probably know who I'm talking about. Our guest this week at the back of the range is Chip Lutz. Chip, thanks so much for taking the time to join me here at the back of the range.
Thank you very much, Ben. Great to be with you.
Well, I've talked to some of your other senior amateur cohorts throughout season one. I got a hold of McCoy, I got a hold of Elliott, and we were able to track you down. They just told me so many stories about you that most can't be told, but that's okay. That's okay. We're gonna move past that. We're gonna get to the stuff we can share.
Yeah.
Before we get started with your senior amateur accomplishments that are plentiful, but I did a little digging, as I like to do. Is you got a birthday coming up in a couple days, don't you?
Actually, I do. It is tomorrow of all days. I will be 64 tomorrow, January 11th. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I'm an old senior as compared to McCoy and Elliott. Those are youngsters.
I know. They're like on skateboards at the mall, just like wreaking havoc all the time. Now, you're 64? You're going to be. Have you shot your age before?
I haven't, but I'm hoping that I can soon. I'm looking for the nearest pitch and putt pretty shortly. And hopefully I can, go low on one of those or a putt. So I'm looking forward to that day. I got kind of close not long ago and put up a 5 under, but that really wasn't still. I'm not that old yet.
You got it. Yeah, you got a little ways to go. So you got a birthday coming up. We're not going to go all the way back to 63 years ago for when things started for you, but we always like to get a little bit of information about how you got into the game. I know you have some pretty amazing connections early in your experience in golf. So give me just a brief history.
Well, I mean, going back to about 2 or 3 years old, my brother Wedge and I were pretty much born at the Reading Country Club. So
okay, hold on. I need to stop you really quickly here. Did you say your brother Wedge?
I did, yes. And my brother Wedge was, in fact, his birthday would be today or tomorrow as well. We shared the same birthday, and I say shared because unfortunately we lost him
Yeah.
just this past year. But Wedge was exactly 1 year to the day older than I was, and we really grew up in the game. I mean, I've got a picture with my dad down at the Reading Country Club of he and I at like age 3 and 4, 2 and 3, in our saddle shoes and shorts and little blazers on down on the putting green at the Reading
Sure.
Country Club. So, goodness, it was a very early start for us. My father was a very good amateur player and played professionally for about a year, and then got his amateur status back and came back into amateur golf in the Reading, Pennsylvania area. But he really brought us up in the game from the time we were just little guys, and we were there a lot. I mean, we had special little putters made by Henry Poe's father, Pop Poe. Henry
Wow.
Poe was actually the successor to Byron Nelson at the Reading Country Club. So, interesting story. Byron was our head pro from 1937 to
You're
39.
kidding.
Oh, and taught my father to play when he was a young boy
Oh
at
my
like
gosh.
age 9, 10 years old. So the history is really deep in Reading, and Byron is a special person and there's a special connection with in Reading. So it's absolutely incredible. His first head pro job, he won the 37 Masters and came to the Reading Country Club with his winnings and stocked the pro shop and remained there through 39 when he won the U.S. Open at Philadelphia Country Club, of all places,
Yeah.
close by to Reading. It was only about 50 minutes away. And at the time, he knew he was leaving to go to Inverness, and he was playing with Craig Wood in a playoff for the championship and at the U.S. Open at Philly Country. And during the course of that round, Byron let Craig Wood know that he was going to be leaving. At the time, Craig Wood was the head pro at Wingfoot, and he had a first assistant there by the name of Henry Poe. And Henry Poe, uh, Craig suggested that he speak with Byron and about the upcoming job that would open at the Reading Country Club. Well, sure enough, that interview took place, and Henry became selected and became the head pro and was there for some 20 years, and ultimately became the president of the PGA of America. So he had another great history and connection to Reading. But between both Henry and Byron, they were both like fathers to my dad and taught him a great deal about the game. So my brother Wedge and I were really kind of following my father's footsteps and just spent a lot of time caddying, playing as juniors and up through the ranks. And, that was our home, really, away from home. So
That's crazy that whole job replacement process took place at a major championship.
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I was surprised about that story, but thrilled to hear that because the connections were just really amazing. But yeah, that was during the actual playoff itself.
That's amazing. So your name's so you have Chip Wedge. I mean, do you have a brother Larry? I mean that would kind of be weird, wouldn't it? I mean,
No, my other brother's putter. I'm sure.
Chip,
Um,
come on,
yeah,
stop it,
yeah,
stop it.
that's my younger brother putter. So you can tell we're a golfing family.
Yeah, I mean that kind of blows all the questions out of the water that I had. Like, so did you feel like you were going to get into golf? Like, what was that decision made? I guess when the birth certificate shows up and there's Chip Wedge and putter. I mean, it's you're going to
Well,
play golf.
actually, it's a little different than that. So, all of our names are John. First names are John with different middle names, family names.
Okay,
So, my father, in his wisdom, he gave us nicknames, and those are really nicknames: Wedge, Chip, and Putt.
that's
So,
so cool.
yeah, and that's really how we've been known almost our entire life. But of course, all of our legal documents are all John. But they
Sure.
had to call us something different, so we knew to answer to a different name.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. That had to have been such a cool childhood and family
Yeah.
experience because I mean you have a built-in foursome and everyone's passionate about golf. Now you mentioned Byron and did you ever get to play with Byron Nelson at all or like how like what was your relationship with Byron Nelson? I know he taught your dad, but were you close? What was that like?
Yeah, it's an interesting story because I never really knew Byron because, of course, he had moved away
Right.
in 39 and then worked at Inverness till he went on a streak, retired from the golf business, if you will, but went into to play full time that year of 45 and had his streak. And from that point, he won enough money and decided that he would come off the tour and
Yeah.
buy the ranch out in the Dallas Fort Worth area. So he really had, I had really no connection with him, but other than the knowledge that, there was a relationship with the family, because my grandfather, my father's father, actually was part owner of the Reading Country Club, and he was the one that really kind of got my dad involved, and my grandfather, knowing and being a part owner of the club, of the Reading Country Club at one point, had that relationship with Byron. So he's the one that kind of really got it started. And but by the time I was growing up, Byron was not in the area and would only visit very infrequently. So it was probably about I think around 91 or so, that a book came out that was written on his autobiography
Sure.
called How I Played the Game. And in that book is a chapter on Reading and some major wins. And it set forth the story about his being the head pro at Reading Country Club and his affinity for the town and for the club. And it also, in that chapter, mentioned about a three quarters of a page story on my grandfather, my father, and my two aunts. And I was actually told about that book by Charlie Rodenbush from Pine Valley. And Charlie had mentioned it to me during one of my visits down there and said, "Hey, you really need to get a hold of this book." Well, of course, I did right away and read it cover to cover. And in that book with that chapter, I was really surprised to learn of this story told about my aunt in particular.
Right.
And from that, I got a hold of Byron's mailing address, and I wrote him about a 3-page letter and brought him up to date on all that had happened with the family over the years and introduced myself. And at the very end, for some reason, I had asked Byron whether I would ever have an opportunity. I would love to come visit him. Well, sure enough, about 3 weeks later, I get a return letter in the mail, and he welcomed me to come out and
Oh,
spend some time with him.
that's amazing.
So that was really a fabulous experience. It was probably about 3 months later, we arranged a time for me to fly out there, and he came to the airport and picked me up.
You got it.
And
Wait a minute. Byron Nelson is just
yeah,
that's so
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't have a car arranged. I didn't have a hotel. I really didn't have anything, kind of arranged in terms of the travel plans. And I got there and I said, Byron,
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm staying or anything. He said, no, you're coming with me to the ranch. So I
Oh my
loaded my stuff
gosh.
up, got my clubs and from the baggage and hauled them out to the car, and we drove out to the ranch.
And you're just looking over like Byron
Yeah,
Nelson is driving
I
me to his
know.
house.
Seriously, it was really amazing. So we get there, and honest to goodness, it's just like was his grandson or his son. I mean,
Right, right.
it was just like I was part of the family. And Peggy was so gracious, and we just spent 3 days together, and and golfed at the club, and had this great match with Peggy and I again, or Byron and Peggy against myself, and we just had a wonderful, wonderful time. And the visit was really super special. I mean, we had dinner together at the house, and I was doing dishes and drying, and he was
That
washing dishes,
that
and
is
I mean, it's
ridiculous.
just
That's so
yeah.
cool.
The one little quick story
No,
is
hey,
I
I'm not shutting you off from this. You go, you go, man. I mean, we'll look, Chip. We'll get to your stuff later, okay? We're
yeah,
talking,
okay, no
we're talking
problem.
about Byron Nelson now, okay?
Yeah. So the interesting little story was when I stayed there that first night, and I was staying in a guest room that had two single beds in it, and the room was painted this dark green, like a master's green,
Right.
and on the table was a book about his captaincy of the Ryder Cup in, and I think it was 1963, if I recall. But there were notes in the books and signatures and things. It was on the coffee table between the two beds, and I was just marveling at that and reading it till the wee hours. But I got up in the next morning, and uh, Peggy said to me, I'm curious. She said, "Which bed did you sleep in? The one on the left or the one on the right?" And I said, "Well, that's curious you ask, but
Yeah.
I slept in the one on the right. But why do you ask?" And she said, "Well, normally Tom Watson sleeps on the one on the left."
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
God.
"Seriously?" I said, "Well, would you mind making up two beds? Because I'm going to the other one
There you go.
tonight."
That's hysterical.
So,
Oh my
oh, I just thought
gosh.
that was really kind of funny. So then roll forward all these years later, I end up in the last handful of years playing with Tom Watson and practice rounds in
Right.
the US Senior Open and the British Senior Open, things of that nature. His caddy, Neil Oxman, has been an acquaintance, and Neil was kind enough to arrange practice rounds with Tom. And Tom was just such a gracious guy. And we had such a wonderful time. So I've done that like three times with Tom. And I've told him that story a few times,
Oh,
and
he
he
had to just,
chuckled.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
this is a phenomenal story. Thank you so much for sharing this one. But I had
Oh,
to,
sure.
so I want to ask you this one. This is going to be completely out of left field, but I asked this question to Stuart Haggeston. I asked it to Matt Parziale when they stayed at the Crow's Nest in
Hmm.
Augusta. I said, I know you would never do this, but there had to be all sorts of memorabilia in the Crow's Nest. Is there anything that looked interesting that you'd be like, wow, I wish I had something like that? So I'm going to transfer that question. Did you see anything in Byron Nelson's house on the ranch that you're like, oh my God, that memorabilia, what is that? I've never seen that. Is it maybe the book that you saw, or was there anything else that just stood out that just said, oh my gosh, how do
Well,
you have this?
yeah, it's interesting you asked that, and it just instantly kind of went back to a memory I had of his family room when I was in there and looking here above the fireplace and above the mantle was this needlepoint. Piece of artwork that was done in green, and here it was given to Byron by a good friend of his, and it was a needlepoint of the Masters scorecard that he had, that was done, and it was above his fireplace, and he so greatly cherished that particular piece.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I thought that was the most unique thing that I had seen, and I thought was really special. And the fact that he considered that to be so special to him. It was his first major win, and it was 1937. It was the year, April of the year he started the Reading Country Club. All those things kind of together, and for him to have made special note that was, meaningful to him was really, really kind of neat.
That
Very
is
personal. Yeah.
that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that was special.
Wow. Well, gosh,
Anyway,
yeah, I know we could fill up a whole episode talking about Byron
yeah, I'm
Nelson, but
sure.
we're gonna need,
Yeah.
but we're gonna need to talk about you, Chip. You've done a couple
Oh,
things.
geez, that's kind of boring.
I know, you've done a couple things. Let's just knock these out, and then I know you probably got golf to go play today, but let's look at. You grew up in Pennsylvania, obviously, and then
Hmm.
you play. We have so many Florida Gators that have come through this podcast.
Oh, I know it. Yeah,
You played at the University of Florida for a couple of years, starting in the early '70s,
I
and
did.
you had a bunch of guys on this team that a lot of people will know. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
You have Gary Koch, and you have a
Yeah.
two-time U.S. Open winner Andy North. Fred Ridley works over at the Masters now, handling a few things. We're just
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah, we're just kidding. He's actually
Yeah.
he's the man in charge over at the Masters.
He's the man.
He's the man. Um, what do you,
Andy Bean.
Andy
Yeah.
Bean, of course. What do you remember most about your time at Florida, and actually what kind of prompted you to maybe, like, what was your decision point of, do I want to play pro? Do I want to stay amateur? What was kind of those 2 years at Florida like for you?
Well, it was really a tough time. It was incredibly competitive. I actually was only a walk-on player. We had over 100 guys playing in qualifying for over 10 rounds of stroke play to make the cut as a walk on
Wow.
this team. We were so deep in talent. I knew we had a very impressive group of guys going there. I was a little bit naive, I think, in applying to go to Florida from Pennsylvania. I had a really good record coming out of high school, but and I had seen and read articles about Florida, but it's not like today. The internet and everything. I mean, gosh, life back in the late 60s, early 70s was not quite as you weren't as tuned in to all that was going on. So
Right.
I'd read a few articles. I knew it was a good place to go to school, that they had a lot of talent and a good team. But goodness, I get down there, and little did I know we would win the NCAA championship with Andy Bean, Gary Koch, Kevin Morris, friend of mine.
Yeah.
Kip Minner, who was from Orlando, was the only senior that graduated in that first year in the national championship team. Other guys, it's just an incredible depth of talent. And I was successful in making the cut. There were about 10 of us, pardon me, as walk-ons who made the squad, but I never really got any time in any events because all the scholarship guys, Phil Hancock was another one, if you remember that name,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Alabama. Um, Ben Duncan, another fellow from the Panhandle. We just had an incredible group of players. But in any event, I played the orange and blue matches on the weekend and continued to work on my game in the first year. And then the second year, I made the cut again. And then I started looking around, and I'm thinking, we graduated one out. We went to Title IX. Title IX was approved, and we went from 8 full scholarships. They were cutting back to 5. And we just won the championship and graduate one. And I'm thinking, well, this is going to be a long program.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
And I really kind of had to make a decision, I think, at that point. I came to the reality that the educational part was going to be more important. And I really didn't think I was going to play any professional golf. It was, and nor did I want that as a career in terms of club involvement.
okay.
So I really made that decision to quit playing, and I did. I stopped playing. I left the team, and I stayed at Florida and completed my degree there. So after finishing, then I went back to Pennsylvania and maintained my amateur focus, and really never even looked back or thought about professional golf from at that time from
That
on.
yeah, that's kind of fascinating because
Yeah,
I would say that, and I mean, obviously hindsight 2020, looking back, you just never know where life is going to take you. But you
right.
could have been at a different school, been a starter, played all 4 years, had a decent college career, and
Most
perhaps
likely.
you would have given it a shot because you wouldn't have realized maybe. Being at Florida, I think you realize really quickly, like, wow, if these guys are doing this in college, this
Yeah.
is what the pro ranks are going to be like.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. That had an effect on the outcome, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But I really liked Florida. I was involved in a fraternity there and Sigma Chi, and I just really enjoyed the school, and I just kind of realized that it's not really. I'm kind of a homer
Yeah.
generally.
Sure.
I love traveling, I love playing golf, and I love doing that, but kind of on my own schedule and my own for my own purpose rather than doing it for a career. So
Right.
no, I've never regretted that decision. This amateur career has really been tremendous. I've had the opportunity and the success, so it's really been just about as good as I could imagine.
Oh,
Anyway,
of course. Well,
yeah,
your senior accomplishments have been just absolutely incredible. I mean, we're going to get into a few of the events. We're not going to go through all of them because
uh,
I'm running out of tape. But I mean, you have British senior amateur wins to your credit, Canadian senior amateur wins to your credit. I mean, you won those both in 2011 and 2012 back to back, which is,
I
I mean,
did.
that's insane right there. But I want to talk about before and leading up to turning 55 when you became
Mhm.
eligible to play in these. Did you play a lot as a mid-am? What was your, how did you get your game ready so that when you turned 55, you were off and running?
Yeah, it was actually, I had actually stopped playing for about 5 years from 1993 till about 98. And then
Wow.
I realized, I'd done very well in the Philadelphia section, and that's an extremely competitive regional area. And I had done nicely there. But I decided in 98 to start seeing what my game would really be made of, especially if I was able to, look at different venues. It's one thing to play local county golf, regional golf, but it's important to kind of see what you can do on a bigger level. And
Sure.
and these levels are really, trying to test your skill set, see how you measure up with others, trying to get a sense for whether you can be competitive and whether you can win. So I think that was a part of a process I had to go through. I had to kind of see where I'd stack up, and if I had enough confidence in where I was to really be successful in that arena and test it out. So kind of early on, I got right into qualifying for some U.S. mid-ams. I don't recall exactly how many I played in, but I made match play, a number of times. The NCR Club was one of I think my first venue where I made it to the second round, and Danny Green beat me in the second round
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
and took me out. So I had some early success, and I think that was part of the test case for continuing on and realizing that I would have the ability and I'd have the uh, skill set to really do something and be successful at it. So that really started the campaign. I was ultimately 55 in 2010. So it took me a number of years to continue to work on my game and then sort of think about work and children and kids growing up and
Right.
getting
Right.
out of the nest. So it was a real timing issue then as well. So by the time I got to 55, I was really in a much better position from a work perspective and family perspective. And my wife Bonnie was just really gracious in letting me to continue to run this course and then look forward to turning 55 and flipping the switch and trying to get into another division that where I would be the young guy and be competitive in a in another arena.
Right.
And that was really something I looked forward to. And right out of the gate, I never really turned back from that point. This will be my 10th year, which is incredible. But I've played in every U.S. senior amateur since. I've been in 4 semifinal matches so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after the first 4 years, I was in 3 semifinals and lost each one of them in a variety of ways, doing everything from shooting 6 under par 66 against Phil Pleat at Vinnie Giles' course in Kinloch in Virginia. And that was kind of a stunning loss.
Sure.
And after that one, I was like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to be able to get this done? And, at one point I'm thinking, I've lost in semis 3 times. And you kind of do some internal reflection. And somebody said to me, well, maybe you're not really a good match play player. I had to stop and think. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Now in 4 years, who else has won as many matches as I have
That's there you
to
go.
get to where I am? I can do this.
You can do that. Yeah.
So it wasn't until a couple years later, and I was running out of exemptions. But in 2015, I managed to focus enough and make a great run at Hidden Creek and finished it off. And that was really the capping of what I thought had been a great run.
Oh, of course.
It was incredible. So I had, a number of other victories early, but I did manage the following year in 16 to win my 3rd British. And I also managed to get 4 silver medals in the British Senior Open, so that the silver medal is for the low amateur in the Open, Senior Open. So I was presented with 4 of them over the course of, I think, 6 years. So it's been really fantastic. Just beyond my expectations, but success sometimes breeds success. And once I got going and managed to do well, I just kind of kept the pedal down and kept it going.
That's phenomenal.
So I've been just really incredibly fortunate. Yeah.
You mentioned starting, and you mentioned starting at 55. You kind of dove into a little bit about the work-life balance. We have a lot of listeners that reach out with questions that they would like me to ask some of our guests. And a friend of the show, Adam out in California, he reached out. He's like, I want to know how these elite amateurs are able to shoot these scores and win these tournaments they have jobs and wives and kids and dogs that pee on the rug just like I do.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
how do they do that? Is there just a different level of talent, or do they have some process? So I know that the talent levels are different across all levels of amateur golf, but can you share a little bit of what maybe a regular week during the season when you're not traveling, but like what does a regular week look like, or what does a week look like that
Yeah.
you're using to prepare for the next tournament?
Yeah, those are different weeks.
Of course, yeah. And I don't,
Some,
I'm not asking you to go through your entire
yeah, no,
litany,
no.
but like, can you share something that maybe, the guy that's a 3 handicap that is really needs to play their best to qualify for a U.S. Mid-Am,
Right.
that's never been to a U.S. Mid-Am, that thinks, hey, if I could just get there once, that would be a thrill of a lifetime.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and it is. And I certainly wish everyone that opportunity because it's a unique and special experience. So I think it's real personal in nature. I can tell you what I do, and others may have different personal experiences. And I guess it sort of comes from, knowing yourself and knowing your own skill set and your level of focus and your desire to work a schedule and be on some kind of a regimen. Because when I look at my schedule, I really have to kind of map this out, and it requires a bit of preparation in a methodical way so that you can really try to get to the right place at the right time. You obviously don't want to be too tired, so you have to go through a series of preparational phases. And for me, it takes me generally like a couple of weeks to, if I'm going to look, to go into a major, 2 to 3 weeks of methodical processing and preparation, where you work on all aspects of your game. And I always really feel as though I need to balance practice and play, because you can practice all day long, but you're always going to be hitting it on a flat lie. and
Right.
and you can repeat your mechanical swing and develop tempo and realize what your distances are. And that's really critical with every club, to know exactly how far you hit each club. Make sure you have the proper gapping among all your clubs. Sometimes you have one club and you think, oh, I'm hitting this a little bit too far. Or one, I'm hitting too short. Well, you probably should check the lofts on those clubs and make sure you have the proper gap spacing, and get somebody to look at that, because clubs bend during the course of the year with the impact that you make in the turf over time. So you need to kind of really assess and make sure your equipment is properly set, and then work yourself into a phase of, you know, um, repetition and practice. But then you have to augment that with play, because that's where you're going to get the side hill lies, the uphill, the downhill, the compound lies, the different bunker shots that you're going to have, the lines you need to take on certain off the tee, and how you want to shape a shot in one way or another. So you really have to work that aspect as well. And then think about putting and short game. I mean, there's another whole phase where you need to focus on. When you think about hitting greens in regulation, you're going to make 36 long shots, drives and approaches, and then you're going to have 36 putts if you're on the green, and two putt every one.
Right.
So that means putting's half your scoring.
Of course.
Goodness, don't forget to really spend a lot of time on putting, in terms of alignment and speed control, and distance and things of that nature. So there's a lot of phases, and I try to break them down into the long game, the short game, in terms of practice regimen, and constantly analyze through playing and practicing. And whether it's 9 holes, listen, this is a tough game to master. Nobody ever does
Right.
completely, but you need to find the balance that you can execute all the shots you're presented with in competition, and by doing it, repetition in terms of practice, and then play, supplementing it with play is really critical to get all the other aspects of the game. So I really try to measure my practice. Some days I'll just be practice only, then I might play the next day, and then I may start mixing it in a little of each. And again, time's a big constraint. So whether it's 9 holes, whether it's hitting balls for an hour, there are ways to at least stay in the game during the week when you're working, when you have dinners to go to, kids things to do.
Right.
But if you can either get up early and practice in the morning and get to work, or you can go there at lunch and hit balls, or maybe you can sneak out for 9 at the end of the day. I mean, there's a way to kind of work that in your schedule, just like working out. And if you can kind of fit that in a way that's sequenced enough that it can give you the balance you look for, and then if you find any particular area of weakness, then work on that. As you get closer, to competition. So
Right.
I know that's a long answer.
No,
but,
you're fine. That's
this
fine.
is a lot of stuff. But,
yeah, there's a lot. Well, hey, that's that. You're a
Yeah.
you're a USGA senior champion, and British and Canadian. So you're the guy to talk to.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of these tournaments involve match play.
Mhm.
It's funny you're talking about. You're kind enough to call me yesterday to do a little pre-planning for this episode, and Chip, you can't be this nice of a guy. I mean, seriously. And what's funny is that I'm a big fan of John Feinstein, and one of his great books. I mean, he has a lot of great books, but one of them is called The First Major, and he alluded to the fact that maybe some guys are too nice and that they lack that killer instinct, and maybe they didn't win as much as they should have. So I want to ask you this question: in match play, are you the nice guy out there that's just yucking it up and being buddies with everyone and then just quietly, kicking their butts? But like what's your persona on the golf course? Do you go dark, or are you just the same way all the time?
I try to be the same way. Obviously, there's a lot of internal stuff that goes on that you try to separate from the external
Sure.
view or image that you may portray. But obviously, different things happen at different times, and your emotions kind of can run a little hot or cold, and you can express yourself differently at different times depending on the day and the competitor you're playing against. So you have to sort of measure that, I guess, and see what you think might be the best strategy for a given situation. So I've come up against some tough hombres or some guys that are cussing and carrying on, and I kind of take different tacks, I guess, depending on what the circumstances present. But nonetheless, I think my hopefully my even temperedness is helpful, in the long run. And I think I would tend to be more along those lines as compared to, and I like to acknowledge guys that make great shots or do
Right.
things, and I'm complimentary. I'd like to be supportive in a way, but yet
You
I like to still kick the crap out of them.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So, there certainly is that a burn going on, but
Yeah.
I try to overcome that and at least be complimentary and appreciative of, the things that they do, and try to say nice things. don't be nasty. So, I still want to be friends with everybody in the end of the day.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
and make it a good experience. And losing sometimes is very difficult, and you got to swallow hard and, congratulate everybody and look forward to the next opportunity. So, but those are the things that drive you then. And of course, the losses are the ones that really give you the fuel to do better next time and try to learn from those experiences. So,
Sure.
but yeah, I try to be a good guy as best I can.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, don't we all? We all
Yeah.
try and do that.
Yeah.
I want to ask just a couple questions about the Senior Open in 2016, but before we get to that, we glossed over the Canadian Amateur, the British Senior Amateur. What's been what prompted you to first pop over across the pond? What was your first? I mean, had you been over there to the UK before playing in these tournaments? Have you done many?
Yeah.
So what do you like so much about going over to the UK and playing links golf?
Well, I just love history of the game, and I
Sure.
think it all really started over there. And when I got there in 1998, it's actually the first year I started playing. I joined three other local guys from Reading who were older than me generally, and one of them is from Skye, Scotland. George McLeod, and George is, encouraged me to come along with he and Rod Eakin and David Jones, three guys from Berkshire Country Club in Reading. And I joined these fellas, and I just had the time of my life, and I just could not believe how much fun it was to play over there. I tend to have, a lower ball flight, and
Okay.
although I
Okay.
can hit it higher, I'm a good. I sort of feel as though I'm a good ball striker, and solidly hit balls in wind and the ground conditions are different over there, but it seemed as though my game suited that style of play, and I'm adaptable in my game to a variety of course conditions and things, and I think that's what really kind of intrigued me is that it was a different style of play, and the history of the game over there was like no other,
Right.
and I just found it to be very intriguing. And that was my first indication that it was something I would really love to do and try that as an opportunity. So when I was given the chance to, after having made the cut in the U.S. Senior Amateur, that gave me an exemption to play over there in the British Senior Amateur. So I took advantage of that first year, and I finished second to one of my rivals, Paul Simpson,
Oh
and
yeah,
in the
Paul
first year
Simpson.
at
Yeah.
Walton Heath. And after my experience at Walton Heath, I thought, I love this. This is good stuff. So I came back then in 11 and 12 and won consecutive years at Royal Portrush, which is going to be the site of this year's Open.
Yes, it is.
And that was phenomenal experience to win there, and then to back it up with a win in Wales at McCannis, and that was 12. And then that sort of propelled me into the British Senior Open exemptions, and then the silver medals, and that gives you exemptions. And, you just kind of, I
Yeah.
was able to keep that rolling for a number of years. And then most recently in 16, winning again, that gave me the exemption to 17. And last year was the British Senior Open at St. Andrews, and that really was spectacular. A lot of my family and friends had come over. We had like 19 people join us, and we just had a big time. And that probably was my Swilken Bridge swan song,
Nice, nice. Well, yeah, because
So,
you and McCoy and Elliot were all over there
yep,
together, and
we were.
you three,
Yeah, it
you
was
three,
fantastic.
you three guys running around in St. Andrews is just that sounds like a made for
Yeah, that's
TV movie.
trouble.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, that's perfect that you just said that because when I talked to, I can't remember if it was McCoy or Elliot, but one of them told the story about them getting stuck someplace out in Scotland with a flat tire, and
That was Mike.
yeah, okay, perfect. So, can you think of any one of your trips that you've been over to the UK where something went haywire with lodging or travel or
Oh,
anything? Oh, I think you got one.
yeah.
We got one. Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
heard.
actually, it's kind of funny. We were this was at the British Senior Amateur at Royal Portrush.
Okay.
So this was the site of my first victory, and my brother putter had just turned 50 with a couple of his buddies, Larry and Bill, and the four of us were traveling a week in advance of the British. And Larry and Bill were going to fly back home, and Bill West and Larry Schultz, those boys were going to leave. But Putter, my brother, was going to stay on and caddy for me in the British Senior Amateur.
Perfect.
So we're traveling around the countryside over there, and we get to Portrush in the little village, and we're at this B&B, and we turn up there for our first night, and the shopkeeper, the innkeeper's like, I don't know. He says, where have you guys been? He's like, you guys are supposed to be here yesterday. And I'm
Oh
like,
no.
I thought, and he's like, I'm ready to give the rooms away. And, the place is a small village there. And
Right.
the place was packed. It was in the summer months, and that's their high season. And fortunately, he did not give it away, but he was
He was,
really not happy with me.
of course.
And I thought I totally blew the whole thing and didn't have a place to stay the first night there.
Y-
But fortunately, we calmed this guy down, and we convinced him that it's all okay. I'll pay you for the extra night,
Right,
and
right. Yeah,
it's
because
my fault, my problem, my fault. I apologize. What can we do? Da, 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 da. So next thing you know, he said, okay, okay, well, I got the room yet, but I'm ready to give it away. And I had other people lined up, and I was like, oh my gosh. So we really dodged a bullet. We managed to get the rooms and stay at the place, and we were on board for the tournament. And by good fortune, I end up winning. And this guy gets, he's really happy then, of course,
oh
and wants
yeah,
pictures and
oh
all
yeah. Now he's your
that.
best buddies. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah. This is
Oh
the
my
place.
gosh.
This is the place where Chip Lutz slept. So yeah, of
Oh my
course.
gosh. Yeah. So too
That,
funny,
that
but almost got ourselves in trouble right out of the gate on that one.
Wow. Wow. Well, these successes, lead into obviously many more tournaments. You get to play the U.S. Senior Open, and then we come back
Hmm.
to Tom Watson because you
Hmm.
and McCoy and Elliott got to join him for a practice round at Scioto, and that's just incredible. But you kind of have a somewhat of a previous relationship with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I had
know,
played with Tom before. Yeah.
yeah, and I know, I know in your press conference at that event, you mentioned that you're always watching and observing the actions of the game's true champions, and at the
Yeah.
time you're looking up to him. Do you kind of feel now that there are maybe some senior AM rookies that have reached out to you and they look at you as a guy that's been there, done that, and has the experience? What's your kind of place within those tournaments now?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, those are 1 year at a time kind of things in the Senior Open, and unless you qualify in or you're exempt, they're difficult certainly to get to.
Sure.
I've been most fortunate to have one like the U.S. Senior Amateur, where you're exempt for 1 year in the Open the next year, and or if you're low am in that year's event, you're good for another year. But those are the only two exemptions, so they're very rare, and otherwise it's quite difficult to qualify in. So, I was lucky to play in two U.S. and about six British Senior Opens, but that's been the extent. And I'm not sure how many more I'll have the opportunity to play in. But they
Right.
were incredible experiences. Uh, I do have occasionally, guys come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, you've been so, fortunate to do it. How'd you do it?"
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to explain that. I mean, uh, but it's a sort of a course of hard work and good fortune, and just I don't know. I don't know how how I differentiate myself versus others, but there's certainly many other people who have been successful in the game, and I'd like to be considered one of them, but. The formula is no magic secret or magic pill. It's just it's a lot of hard work and good fortune. But yes, I have had some folks say, that's amazing. What'd you do? How'd you do it? We go through, practice regimen, things that we just talked about, stuff like that, and then being at the right place and right time and getting a breakthrough moment, and then trying to use that as leverage to kind of keep it going.
Of course. What So let me ask you, you're turning, we're recording this episode on January 10th. Tomorrow's your birthday. You're
Yeah.
turning 64. What you've accomplished so much in your senior amateur career. What still keeps you going? What's on the radar for 2019? I mean, you have nothing to prove. You've won everything you can really win. You've won Crump in Pine Valley as a
Yeah.
senior.
Yeah.
Let's see, Coleman Senior. Have you
Yeah.
checked? You won that. So,
Yeah.
what else? I mean, what are you going to take
I
up?
know.
You're going to
It's
take up.
tough.
You're going to take up chess.
That's the magic question. I kind of ask myself that at the end of every year and the beginning of the next, and
Okay.
it's just a year by year situation for me at this point. I said to myself and my wife and others many times, I think I've had enough, but yet I get to the end of the year and I go, I'm ready to lay them down for a bit and take a break, and I've done that year over year, and I always am happy to get to the end of the season and finally go, give me a,
Yeah. Yeah.
I need a timeout. But then it also, after I'm away from it for a month or two, it reminds me when I start up again, the body hurts a little more. It's a little harder to find my game again. They got to
Right.
work
Right.
at it. And, it is a lot of work, but it's a lot of of joy, and once you get back in and you're in that competitive mode. So I find it difficult to give up, but yet at the same time, I know that there's
This damn
probably
game,
my
this
runway's getting shorter.
yeah, this damn game just gets holdy, and you just can't, you
I
can't get
know it.
rid of. I know.
I'm trying to think of what else I would do. I can fish for a while. I can go, I'd like to spend more time with grandkids and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. But after a while, it still has that pull.
yeah,
That pull is still there.
I know. It's hard to get rid of.
It is, no doubt. So I'm likely to continue to play, and again, maybe in more selected events, and try and pick and choose some places and do some things a little different than I've done before, and just try to enjoy it. It's been a great run, and hopefully there's a little left, and if not, it's been tremendous. Been
Absolutely.
very fortunate.
I forgot to ask you this one question about your
Hmm.
senior amateur victory in 2015. Other than the exemptions and the trophy and all the nice
Yeah.
little perks,
Hmm.
can you think of a perk that maybe most people wouldn't know that you had after winning that tournament?
Well, I think this was probably covered, but I'll say it again, and I'll repeat it, and I beg forgiveness for repeating it. But
No, no, no,
the
no.
biggest thing for me was my mom. My mom really had never seen me play before in competitive golf. My mom was so great and always dropping us off and picking us up from kids on up and being super supportive, of all of us in the game. But it was not until that final match that my brother Putter, who was back home in Reading, I said to him, Mom has never seen me play. And I was approaching that final match. I broke through to the semis
Right.
and got to the final match the next day. And I asked Putter, and I called my mom, asked if she'd like to come down, and she was thrilled. So my brother Putter picked up my mom at like 5 a.m. and drove to Atlantic City down to the course.
Right.
And they were there for the tee off and watched me play my entire final match. And that was the most special thing, for me. And to complete that and have my mom present for one of my biggest victories was really something special.
That's
She was,
that's an awesome
yeah.
story. That's an awesome story. Nothing wrong about sharing that one. So, um, let's
Yeah.
see. We have a small segment at the back of the range called the Quick Bucket. These are just really quick, little fun, little questions, and try and see what your answers are going to be. Let me ask you this one: would you rather play a tournament without golf tees or without wedges?
Ooh, without golf tees. Absolutely.
Would you rather rewrite the ending of Tin Cup so that Roy McAvoy wins the U.S. Open, or would you completely eliminate the existence of Caddyshack 2?
I think I'd probably get rid of Caddyshack too.
Yeah, that's pretty popular.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Would you have rather won the PGA Championship, or would you rather have played on 2 losing Ryder Cup teams?
Wow. Oh, I'd rather win the PGA any day. I'd rather take a victory rather than a participation trophy.
Okay, there you go. Let's see. Would you rather play blades for the rest
Although,
of
you know what, if you think about this, now I'm maybe second guess myself, because if you play on 2 Ryder Cups, that means that you have won a lot of this stuff. So
See?
you may have won more than the PGA
Well,
if you're on a Ryder Cup. So
and see, I've told previous guests when I asked that question, I said the right answer is you want to win the PGA, because winning the PGA
Right.
is going to get you the points to get on the Ryder Cup team.
That's right. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a tough one now.
I know.
I want to
See?
go back and change my answer, I think.
See. Let's see. Would you rather? I know this at this time. Would you rather play blades for the rest of your career or persimmon woods for the rest of your career?
Oh, blades for sure.
Okay.
I wouldn't be giving up as much.
Nice. When's the last time you played persimmon woods? What's the last?
Oh my gosh, my son pulled them out probably 4 or 5 years ago. We were down in the basement. He pulled those out of an old bag, and I found a shag bag, and the shag bag had a whole bunch of balata balls. Well, little did I know, he stuffed a lot of balls in my golf bag and then he stuck the driver, my old Persimmon driver, with a head cover. I didn't know he had it with him.
Oh, nice.
And he pulled balls in the club out when we were on the course like the next day. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that was so much fun to try to hit that again. It was incredible.
That's a fun experience.
It wasn't that long ago.
Oh,
yeah.
Gosh, Baladas. I just think back to the, what were they? They're the Max Flag HT100s. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Those things are terrible.
Spalding dots.
Oh, God. Well, come on, Chip. There's not enough people listening that know what Spalding dots are. Well, I think Elliot and McCoy are probably listening right now, so they're just like laughing right now. But, Chip, this has been a lot of fun. The door is always open if you want to come back and be a future guest, because your stories are phenomenal.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
But thanks so much for joining me here today at the Back of the Range, and happy birthday. I know this is going to air after you turn 64, but happy birthday. I'll be the first one to tell you. And I'm sure I know you're down here in South Florida. You come down, so we need to get together.
Well, let's do that. It's been a great pleasure of mine to be with you today. So thank you for including me, and look forward to seeing you sometime in person.
And another great episode here at the Back of the Range. Special thanks to Chip Lutz for joining us this week. We will see you again next time here at the Back of the Range.